get ready for the impeachment trial next week, trying to stop the fighting in its own ranks. Longtime conspiracy theory advocate Marjorie Taylor Greene now sounds more defiant than repentant after the House voted overwhelmingly Thursday to kick her off committee assignments.
I've been freed. I do. I feel freed because you know what's happening on these committees? You see, we have basically a tyrannically controlled government right now. So if I was on a committee, I'd be wasting my time because my conservative values wouldn't be heard, and neither would my districts.
11 House Republicans joined Democrats in stripping her of those committee posts, and that led Greene to refer to those GOP colleagues, along with the Democrats, as, quote, morons. All this follows Congresswoman Liz Cheney surviving a vote aimed at removing her from House GOP leadership for the sin of voting to impeach President Trump. With me tonight for Perspective is Elisa Fares. She's a former White House communications director under President Trump. She stepped down in December, and prior to joining the Trump administration, she worked with staunch conservatives such as Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, and the House Freedom Caucus. Elisa, thanks so much for being here.
Pamela, thanks for having me.
So let's start with the impeachment trial because that is coming up. What is your reaction to that video and the new reporting from Ardonia Sullivan of the QAnon shaman leaving the Capitol saying Donald Trump asked everybody to go home and therefore he left? What do you think about that in terms of evidence that Democrats could use?
Well, first and foremost, he says in that video, we won the day, and I would just importantly note, he did not win the day, he won a jail sentence. But this underscores really that the president's legal team should really not be trying to relitigate January 6th. The facts are not on his side. That is not a helpful case to make. If I were still advising President Trump, which I am not, I would tell him to focus on the constitutional issues. There is a very open, real question about the constitutionality of impeaching a former president. As your reporter noted in the segment before, that had 45 members vote against the procedural movement to go ahead with this impeachment on those grounds. When we get into litigating the facts of the day of, that's shaky territory for Republicans to be in. So, again, the president should focus on the precedent that this sets and the constitutional side of things.
You have express your concern about the president's role in the insurrection. Should he be convicted?
My recommendation to Republicans would have been they should have gone with censorship, not impeachment. He is no longer a sitting president. This is going into kind of uncharted territory. It sets some interesting precedents. But I would say this, if you just merely went with censoring him in the House and the Senate, I think you would have had significant bipartisan support to show what happened on January 6th was unacceptable. But this is what I worry about, is I think Democrats have a tendency to overreach on these things. The American people want them focusing on getting COVID relief done, getting schools opened, confirming nominees for the Biden administration. I don't think anyone really wants to see a continued impeachment effort go on.
And of course, Democrats say, there is precedent for this because the War Secretary, there was the impeachment trial for the War Secretary in the 1800s when he left. But would you be in favor of censoring after the trial, assuming that Trump is acquitted?
I think it's an open question for Congress. I'm not going to play judge and jury on that. I think it is important that members of Congress do step up and condemn the actions that led to January 6th, and many have done that. I think Kevin McCarthy, I give the leader credit, spoke out very plainly about the president's role in it. But I also think the country needs to move on from this moment. I don't think that we benefit from relitigating over and over what happened that day. We need to be moving forward, dealing with the pandemic, getting help to the American people.
So let's talk more about those Republicans and what's going on in the GOP right now, because Republicans who did speak out and did vote to impeach, like Liz Cheney, have been censured. Just today, Congresswoman Liz Cheney was censured formally in Wyoming for her vote. Just the latest example of state Republican parties punishing lawmakers who have gone against supporting Trump. Do you think that's appropriate?
Well, it's interesting because the Chairwoman Cheney is actually very popular in Wyoming, and as you she went under a secret ballot. She got overwhelming support within the House Republican Conference. I think this is more of internal state politics. Some of the more maybe conservative-leaning wing of the party versus the more establishment. I think she's going to be fine going back into her district. She tends to deliver for her district. She's a vocal and important voice on the House Armed Services Committee. But, I mean, the GOP does have to reckon with this moment that they're in. Obviously, the Marjorie Taylor Greene issues kind of dominated the week. And unfortunately, Kevin McCarthy is in a very unenviable position there. But I actually think it was kind of the worst case scenario what ended up happening. The Republicans not punishing her and not taking the action to strip her of her committee assignments led to then Democrats doing that. So she gets to look like a martyr to her base. And then we have this dangerous precedent in the House of the one party stripping members of their committee assignments in another party. So that raises some concerns going forward.
But, the Liz Cheney example today, we're seeing that a pattern emerge with the Republicans who do speak out against Trump. It's almost as though they get punished in a sense. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, lashing out, as we talked about in the interview. She lashed out at some of her fellow Republicans who voted to strip her from the committee and says it could cost the Republican seat in the midterms. Are they the ones that could threaten Republicans in 2022, or is the Marjorie Taylor Greene camp, do you think?
Well, listen, President Trump will continue to loom large over the Republican Party, for better or for worse. What I would say, though, is when you look at members like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, she could be beat in her district by a conservative-leaning, rock-ribbed conservative who supports President Trump's policies but hasn't made these outrageous claims like denying 9/11, victimizing the families of the Sandy Hook victims. There are people who could go against them and step up. We're still upholding those America First values. But she's not the future of the party.
But let's talk about those conspiracy theories that you just pointed out that she has perpetuated before she was a member of Congress. It seems as though the Republican Party has become more entangled with those conspiracy theories. How do you rid the party of those harmful beliefs? What do? I imagine you're a Republican. What is your concern about that?
Well, listen, I think it's concerning that it took until this past week for her to denounce them and really walk those back. I appreciated her apology just a couple days ago, but it was much too late, frankly. But what I would say is this: I also don't want to give undue credit to how widespread some of these beliefs are. I think that sometimes one bad apple can frame the broader party, and it's not really representative of the viewpoint. I mean, the number of Republicans who came out and denounced some of the more anti-Semitic-leaning rhetoric that she used, the 9/11 denial. I mean, every mainstream Republican I know came out and fiercely denounced that, as well as her going after Sandy Hook victims. So I would hardly say she's representative of the broader party.
I just want to ask you, from your perspective, as a conservative who worked in the Trump White House, she has said that she's actually getting a lot of support from people back home, that they're rallying around her with this controversy surrounding her. Did you see that dynamic with Trump? I mean, does she have a point there that the more people like her under scrutiny, the more support they get essentially from their own supporters?
Well, and that was the point I was making, that I do fear that Democrats being the one to take her off her committee assignments, or largely Democrats, actually does build her support back home, because there's a very fair critique by many Republicans in this country that they feel like the system is against them, Washington is against them, and Democrats are often working against their efforts in Washington. So I think that helps her build sort of a martyr complex that isn't helpful to anyone. What I hope to see is that Marjorie Taylor Greene puts her head down, does important work for her district, learns from her mistakes, take some time to study what happened on 9/11, go across the river, visit the Pentagon. This should be a time for her to actually deliver for her district, not get carried away in crazy conspiracy theories.
Alyssa, thank you so much for coming on the show. We hope you'll come back as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pamela.